Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Our topic tonight is nullification, specifically the legislation sponsored by Senator Bowling and Representative Halsey. That's House Bill 2795, Senate Bill 2775. The summer session for this legislation is scheduled for this coming Thursday, October 3rd, from 12:30 to 3:30 p.m. Central at the Cordell Hall Building, Senate Hearing Room 1. Joining us to discuss this tonight is our special guest, Senator Janice Bowling. Senator Bowling, thank you for being with us tonight, and thank you for fighting this good fight and many others. When it comes to things that really matter, you are one of the few in the Senate that consistently fight the good fight, and I appreciate you being on.
I appreciate that. Well, Dave, I appreciate this opportunity, and I appreciate you making this subject a topic for the people to be aware of, because I think it's very timely, particularly coming up with this election. If we don't reelect Trump and get him back in the White House, we're definitely going to need to be informed on how nullification works. It's already there. These are just 5 ways to implement it. Absolutely.
Well, I think certainly if we don't get him back in, we're going to definitely need to use it. But I think even if we get him back in, the federal government still has a tendency to overreach. So, I mean, bottom line is states have to stand up, no matter who's in the White House. But yes, I will agree, we're toast. We are toast if we don't get him back in this time around.
And all God's children say amen to what you just said. I agree with you completely.
So let me ask, what prompted you initially to file the nullification bill? Because you filed it originally in 2023, correct?
I filed it originally in 2022. And I'll tell you what happened. What really caused it was COVID-19. And I filed it that year with Representative Clay Doggett. Yep. And we had a bill that would address the state's ability to refuse to comply with overreaching directives, also being referred to as mandates, coming out of the White House. Now, the people make mandates, Dave, not the government, and it's called an election, and their mandate always is going to be supporting their own God-given liberty. So for the White House, and then the governor's house even started mandating things. You've got to close your churches. You can't leave your house. You've got to wear a mask. All of these things were direct encroachments on individual medical choices and individual social choices, particularly regarding our First Amendment right to worship. So that's what made me get involved initially. It was just all of the government overreach that was coming down on us illegally, unconstitutionally, from the federal government, and then creeping into our state, which was another way we'd have to fight that. But we have notification in order to fight the federal overreach.
Absolutely. Now, that's 22. Well, in October of 21, just a few months before the session in 2022, the Senate and the House, Republican supermajority, passed SJR 9005. And now the governor didn't sign it, but we didn't have to have the signature. It passed unanimously. And the gist of that bill, if you read the bill, I think the thing that stands out about it the most to me, that it says that in order to uphold their oath, this is the legislators, that they have not only the right, but the responsibility to nullify unconstitutional federal overreach. And this is my paraphrase, and oh, by the way, we are not limited to court action. And that's right. That's what they said, and they were absolutely right. So what I don't understand is how we went from that to acting as if nullification is some foreign concept.
One of the things, and I don't want to be dismissive of what we did with that Senate Joint Resolution, because it did have the effect of making a case and planting your feet and taking a stand. but it stopped short of being law on how to do it. It talked about the fact that we were just doing it, and that was fine. That was well, and as you said, the governor refused to sign it, but it didn't need his signature because he didn't veto it. He just didn't sign it. So it becomes law, or it becomes a resolution 10 days after it's passed up to him, whether he signs it or not. But what I thought was so important, when you read that resolution, it says, whereas denying any one government complete jurisdiction over the concerns of public life, federalism protects the liberty of the individual from arbitrary power when government acts in excess of its lawful powers. That liberty is at stake. And then it says, whereas limitations prescribed under federalism are not a matter of rights belonging only to the states, states are not the sole intended beneficiaries of federalism. An individual has a direct interest in objecting to laws that upset the constitutional balance between the national government and the states. And that's one of the reasons in our bill with Bud Halsey, we give 5 pathways to enact nullification. Because when you look at it, the one that the lieutenant governor actually was the one that authored the Senate Joint Resolution 9005.
Yep. But
it was strictly the state saying that. In our bill, we also talk about the fact that 2,000 citizens can sign a petition. 10 different counties or cities can come together. There were 5 different ways. The governor could do it, the General Assembly could do it, the AG could do it.
Yeah.
So we're just saying, hey, folks, this can be done any number of ways. And arguably, if one level failed to do it, it was already there, another opportunity for a different level to do it.
And I think we've got that on the slide here. I think if we can pull that up about the 5 different methods. I know that also the first one listed actually says that the governor, but now understand, well, you know this, but the audience out there may not understand that, okay, the governor could give an order to the executive branch. Well, that's, what governors can give orders to executive branches. That's not in dispute, right, that they can give orders to the executive branch. So in the case of something coming down from the federal government that he thought was unconstitutional, he's well within his right as a governor to say, okay, executive branch, we're not going to do this, okay?
We're not going to implement this in unconstitutional directive. And everything doesn't go back to who issued it. Was it the Supreme Court ruling? Was it the president? It goes back to the fact that they do not have the authority under the Constitution to do that. So it all goes back always to the Constitution.
Yeah, it has to be a delegated authority. And so some people, when they hear nullification, they have a lot of misunderstanding about it. Number one, it's not, oh, well, we don't like this, so we're going to nullify it. And nullification, and I'm going to bring this up because a lot of people think, well, nullification, that's secession. No, it's not secession. Nullification is actually the state upholding the Constitution. It's the state authorities upholding their oath to both their state and federal Constitution. Just like we expect federal agencies to uphold the oath to the Constitution, we expect our state officials, and it's not just the powers that we delegated that we expect them to uphold. The things that they're prohibited from, we expect our state to stand up. And that's what you and Representative Halsey are trying to create processes to do that with this legislation. But I do want to kind of go over these methods a little bit. So just so everybody understands, this is a process bill for rights and responsibilities that our Senate, just in 2021, unanimously said we have the right and the responsibility to do this, okay? And I mean, that was cut and dried. It was not up for debate. They just did not create a process. So you're like, okay, well, everybody's on the same sheet here. Let's create, bills with the process to do this. And so, like we said, the governor can do it. A single legislator can bring forth, if he thinks something that's come down from the government, whether it be Supreme Court opinion, whether it be an EO, whether it be legislation, whether it be an agency rule, whatever the case may be, if he thinks it's unconstitutional, then he brings it forth to the legislature. The legislature has to vote on it. So it's not like just, well, one rep decided it was unconstitutional and now we're going to nullify it. We're going to bring it forth. It's going to skip the normal committee process. It's going to go to the floor, and it's going to get voted on. So it's not even guaranteed that the legislation or the issue in question will be nullified. It's just, it's going to be heard, and there will be a decision made.
And as you clearly stated, it's not because we don't like that, but what we're saying is, no, federal government, you're out of your lane, and you're exercising overreach. You have no authority in that area. And particularly that goes to the president. When presidents begin to think that they are acting like dictators rather than implementers of what the Congress is the sole group that has the right to make law at the federal level, and then they are restricted in which laws and what they can govern. I think Bud Halsey gives a clear picture when he says they have a real small garden. And it has a fence around it. And we, the people, in each of the states have our own much larger gardens because the states are the people in the final analysis are the power. The power resides in the people. And each state represents the people in that state. And so when they are looking at what the federal government's doing, when the federal government gets out of their little garden and starts messing in our bigger gardens, we have this right to send them back packing.
And speaking of that garden, for anybody out there who's wondering, if you look at Article 1, Section 8, that's the federal garden. Okay, there's a few other places in the Constitution that there's federal powers. Most of them are related to that. And oh, by the way, if you look at, to clarify that, to kind of match up with that, Article 1, Section 10 lays out the things that states can't do, okay, and they complement, for the most part, what's listed in Article 1, Section 8. Right, so that's the federal garden that the feds are supposed to work in, and the feds includes everybody. You're talking Congress, the court, agencies, you name it, and certainly the president.
Right. And while we're talking on that line, Dave, I think it's really important to say, restoring state sovereignty through Nullification Act. What that says, we go back, we take an oath of office to uphold the federal Constitution and the state Constitution. And the Tennessee, Article 1, Section 1, do you think they thought it was important? Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution of Tennessee, all power is inherent in the people. It declares all power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, their safety, their happiness, for the advancement of those ends they have at all times an unalienable and indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they think proper. So that not only says, they can abolish the government, but more importantly, if that overreach comes down through a law or an act or a mandate from the federal government, Article 1, Section 1, and then Article 1, Section 2 of the Tennessee Constitution says that the government being instituted for the common benefit, the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. When we, the people, ordained and established the Constitution, it was for specific limited powers to the federal government. And those areas of federal powers were enumerated in Article 1, Section 8, as you just said. So what we're talking about is, it's shocking that anybody would think that, we're trying to secede, we're trying to do this. No, we're just trying to uphold the oath of office that every senator and every representative takes.
Yeah. And, it's not even realistic to expect that the federal government's not going to attempt to overreach. The founders knew they would attempt to overreach, and they expected the states to protect their states, to say, hey, we're not doing this. You don't have the authority. I mean, that's the reason they laid it out. Article 1, Section 8, here's your garden. Just to remove any doubt, hey, states, you can't do these things. And of course, at the end of, after the Constitution was ratified, there was still a lot of concern. And it was ratified with the understanding that one of the first things in Congress would be a Bill of Rights would be attached. And of course,
That's right.
The first 8 most are familiar with, but you have the 9th Amendment and the 10th Amendment, which were about basically anything, not in a nutshell, any power, whether it's identified or not given to the federal government, is retained by the states and the people. So it only makes sense that the states are going to have to enforce that, not the federal government, not the Supreme Court, the states. They have to do it because it won't happen otherwise.
And it clearly talks about the people. And the state is there, in Tennessee, and just in the United States, too. We are not a democracy. Every time I hear somebody call us a democracy, we've got to say democracy. I just want to hit them, Dave, but I know probably I'd go to jail if I did that. So what I really iterate with everyone is that we are a constitutional republic based on the rule of law. And that's what nullification is all about. Yep. That's what nullification is all about. We have that Constitution. It has the rule of law in there. And if we go beyond that, outside of that domain of the federal government, then it's not only, as was said in that resolution, it's not only our right, it's our responsibility to get them out of our garden and back into theirs.
Now, like we said with the resolution, almost everybody signed it, including, and I'm not even going to waste my time with the Democrats on the committee, but there are 7 Republicans on the committee that's going to be in summer study, and ultimately in the next session we'll get to vote on this bill again. And so there's it's chaired by Senator Briggs. You've got Senator Wally, Senator Yeager, Senator Pody, Senator Stevens, and Senator Lowe. All but Senator Lowe.
And Ed Jackson.
And Senator Jackson. Ed Jackson, yes.
And as you said, Sarah Collins, Jeff Yarbrough are the 2 Democrats. But Richard Briggs, Paige Wally, Mark Pody, Ed Jackson, Adam Lowe, John Stevens, and Ken Yeager are the Republicans.
Right. And in 2021, every Republican we just mentioned, and understand for the audience, Lowe is not there. Every Republican voted for it. Wally was a co-sponsor, and I believe Stevens was a co-sponsor. And when we had the hearing back in March, Senator Wally and Senator Yeager both indicated that they were ready to vote for the bill then. And of course, we know Senator Pody has been supportive of it. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
And this Thursday, what they will be doing Thursday is presenting this information and getting some commitments. There won't be exactly a vote on Thursday because this General Assembly, the 113th General Assembly, died. Sonny died in April of this year. So what's going to happen in January, but Halsey and I will introduce a new bill. It will be a bill, same substance, but it'll be a different bill. And if they do take an affirmative vote, and I wish they would, I wish they would get on record whether it actually means anything or not. It could show the support. And so it would make things a lot simpler in January when we reintroduce the legislation, because it will be reintroduced because we still need this very much.
Absolutely. And, even though they passed the resolution, I think a lot of them now want to hide behind the AG's opinion that was issued last year. But I'll just say this about that. Number one, I've read the opinion. I didn't agree with this opinion, but we had Jeff Cobble, the author of the bill, on this show the night prior to the hearing last March. And he went through line by line on the AG's objections. And I would say that rather than the bill being constitutionally infirm, and this is my opinion, I think the AG's opinion was constitutionally infirm.
And you know what I think the problem is there? I think that same disease a lot of lawyers have, and it started in 1887 at Harvard Law School. There was a dean, Christopher Columbus Langdale. Christopher Columbus, of all names, Langdale. And he was the dean of the Harvard School of Law. And he wanted to make going to law school, he wanted to give more form to it, more requirements to it. They had to go to classes more. They had to take tests, if you will. And he decided that what he wanted those studying the law to go and look at all the different cases that had been decided. Now, you heard the word case law.
Right.
Well, case law is our enemy. Case law, I liken case law unto children playing the game of gossip. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you whisper something in this person's ear, and it could be based on some truth. Then they whisper it to the next person, and they go around the room and around the circle until then the last person that hears what was whispered, it's always hilariously funny because it has lost a lot in transition and translation around that room. And so when they started going to case law, that's what started destroying us because they had prior to that been going back to the founding document, going back to the Constitution. And when you start basing a case on a case on a case on a case, it doesn't even resemble our Constitution anymore. And they say, well, you know, it was ruled in this case, and it could have been just a little bit off course. But then when you make a ruling on a ruling that's already not really plumb with the Constitution, you're heading for trouble.
Yeah, well,
and I think we're there.
I think we're there. We've been there. And, you know, their oath is to uphold the Constitution. It's not to uphold case law.
That's right. Exactly. And that needs to be brought up to their attention, and they need to be made to understand that because a lot of people, you know, when I was researching, trying to find out when did they stop really making law based on the Constitution, and that's where the search led me. And I feel comfortable that Harvard Law School, that was the prime law school, and for them to say case law was better than constitutional law and start training lawyers, who knows what else they've changed to make it where the lawyers have power. And really they don't. Their only responsibility and power is to uphold the Constitution. And they're far adrift from that, I believe.
Absolutely. And, you know, so many people believe that, you know, by their false interpretation of the Supremacy Clause, which makes their interpretation of the Supremacy Clause basically means Article 1, Section 8 is moot. Don't even know why you would need Article 10. It makes the Bill of Rights moot. Certainly makes the 9th and 10th Amendment moot. So, you know, if you read it the way the federal supremacists read it, it makes all these other things moot. You really don't have rights. Everything comes down to 5-4 Supreme Court decisions. And, you know, most conservatives, if you ask them, they'll tell you the concept of a living Constitution is crazy liberal stuff. And then in the next breath, they will tell you that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of all constitutional questions. Well, I'm sorry. That is a living Constitution. That's not following something that's written in stone. That is a living Constitution, and that's a problem.
That is exactly right. And what the Supremacy Clause, actually, the kind of trail of that, you know, when it talks about the Supremacy Clause and the federal government, it's recognizing the laws that were made pursuant to the Constitution.
Yep.
And the Constitution, like you're saying, is the Constitution. You've got to go back to what the Constitution said about it, not what some other lawyer has said, and then a lawyer has said something else on that, with that little game. So even the supremacy clause requires made pursuant to the Constitution, and they seem to ignore that part of it.
Yeah, they want to skip over that.
If they wanted to skip over the direction of where that comes from. So it's really a mystery why now in the General Assembly we're getting any pushback, why this didn't pass in 2022, 2023, 2024. We were seeing the federal government issuing mandates in violation of individual liberty. And they were making medical decisions for us. They were making worship decisions for us. They were making business decisions for us. And they had no authority to do any of that. We were on a slippery slope. And that's when some of us began to realize we need to go back and show that the Constitution is still the Constitution and that the laws have to be made according to the Constitution, and we're not going to just keep going back to case law.
Right. Well, and here's the thing too, they don't mind all of a sudden ignoring case law if they want to, because think about it, they would have a precedent for like 50 years, and then all of a sudden, we're going to change that precedent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. If they were consistently following the Constitution, we wouldn't have had all these different changes over the years. So all of a sudden they make a decision and they change course. And a lot of people will say, well, it's not realistic to expect them to go back and follow the Constitution as written. Well, I don't know why it's not realistic. And I don't care how much time has passed, because we used to have this thing that was understood for 5,000 years as marriage, and then we allowed the court to tell us that it is something else. And I think that is really a ding on all the states, ours included, that we allow a court to tell us what marriage is. That's disgraceful.
It is, and I had legislation addressing that as well, because marriage is instituted of God. And so the fact that in like the 1920s, 30s, they decided you need to get a license from the state to get married, well, that was being done for all sorts of reasons that maybe would not be so noble. But the point is, it was still understood that it was a marriage was between a man and a woman. And Tennessee has in our Constitution the definition of marriage. It is between a man and a woman. And that is an amendment to the state's Constitution, and it's pretty clear. So I had legislation that called that up again, and actually what it did, let me back up just a minute. The day Obergefell passed, the governor at the time was Haslam, and Slatery was the AG at the time. They, in Tennessee, immediately sent out a letter telling county court clerks that the new law, now it was not a law, it was a Supreme Court ruling, and the Supreme Court had ruled in Tennessee, there were about 5 different cases they were looking at. In Tennessee, 2 women had moved into the state of Tennessee, and where they had lived, they had married according to that state's law. Then they moved into Tennessee. Tennessee did not recognize that marriage. That Obergefell horrible ruling said that Tennessee would have to recognize same-sex marriages that came from outside the state of Tennessee. The governor totally ignored what the Supreme Court ruling said, in my opinion, because they then sent a new form for everyone to have to fill out your marriage license. And it didn't say man, groom, wife, woman. It did not use any of those, mother, father. It said party 1, party 2, party 3, party 1, party 2, party 3, parent 1, parent 2. They changed our marriage license. A lot of the preachers began to be very concerned about signing a license that was in total contradiction to their strongly, personally, faith and beliefs. So I carried legislation that said in Tennessee, we recognize a marriage between a man and a woman. And if a man and a woman marry and come to the state county court clerk, they can request, if they want it, they swear an oath that, yes, they are married before God, before family, before witnesses, wherever. They can do it in church. They can do it in a home. They can do it at an event, marriage event place. But the point is, they were married in Tennessee, and they want to have the contract that they are married and evidence of that, a certificate for buying real estate, for insurance purposes, for whatever reason they might need it. But that was the difference with the distinction. They were not going to the state to get a license to get married. We were recognizing that our Constitution already describes what marriage is. And if a couple married according to the Constitution of the state of Tennessee and to the Word of God, then they could register that marriage in the state of Tennessee if they wanted to. Well, people went nuts. They didn't know what a man was, and they didn't know what a woman was. I said, I knew the Supreme Court didn't understand that, one of the people that was being considered. But I never dreamed that the folks in Tennessee didn't know that a man is an adult male, a woman is an adult female. And so my bill passed through committee in the Senate. And the lieutenant governor asked if I would hold it for 1 week before I presented it on the floor. And little did I know what he planned to do in that week was kill it in the House. So it did make it through committee in the Senate.
Why does that not surprise me, considering who our lieutenant governor is? We could do a whole show on the reasons why that guy should have been thrown out of office a long time ago. I want to cover a little bit. Well, before I do want to say one thing. Compare how fast our state folded on the issue of marriage because of a Supreme Court opinion versus the Bruin opinion of over 2 years ago that said if you have any law on the books against the right to keep and bear arms that was not comparable to something in 1791, then your laws are illegal. But our state has fought tooth and nail to keep from going along with that opinion. But they caved for the gays in a heartbeat, and they've drugged their heels on guns ever since Bruin was passed. So I have a problem either way with the Supreme Court being the final say, because I don't think that was the intent. But I want to talk a little bit about the history of nullification. So obviously. Okay,
may I say one thing while we're on the gun subject?
Yes.
I believe it's in 2010, before I arrived there. But Tennessee passed a law that said no state, if any federal law came down that took away Second Amendment rights or infringed on the Second Amendment rights, that Tennessee essentially nullified it by preemptively saying the state would spend no money or resources to enforce any such infringement on the Second Amendment.
Yeah. And that's a form.
Is that nullification? That's preemptive nullification.
Yeah, that's a form of nullification. That's the anti-commandeering, which the courts have recognized. But there's different aspects of nullification, and I think what you guys were talking about, referencing in the resolution, and certainly what you're talking about in your bill is taking a little more direct action. At least that's how I take it. But let's talk a little bit about the history of nullification, if you want to hit on that a little bit. So that I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that some people think that nullification has never worked, but I don't believe that's the case. And I'll give you a couple minutes to hit on that if you want.
Well, sure. And the history of nullification, as we said, goes back to Thomas Jefferson. When he was telling the Kentucky people, that they did not have to they could oppose and they could just not enforce a law that was trying to be put on them. But also, when you looked back at Andrew Jackson in the state of Tennessee, when he vetoed the legislature, this is not nullification exactly, but he was saying there would be no national bank, and he vetoed that bill because of that legislation, because he said that it was against the Constitution. And so people have opposed things that were contrary to the Constitution, the way it was made, the way it came from, whoever it came from. And since the ratification of the Bill of Rights in 1776 and what we went on, the legal theory that a state can invalidate, refuse to enact any federal law it deems unconstitutional, that's just what's been accepted. And like I said, then you come back up to 1887, and we start getting that case law, and people seem to be ignorant of what our Constitution says and doesn't say. So the people are the final answer, and today states continue to enact laws and policies, essentially nullifying federal laws in several different areas. So some states are already doing it. It is really not that, should not be that controversial a thing. It's something that was provided for that we can say, no, that's not constitutional. The federal government has no jurisdiction there. And we just refused to do it. We refused to expend any money to enforce anything that's unconstitutional. Goes back to the bill that I said just now, the gun law back in about 2010. But it also covers more than that, because what it's saying is that we, the people, the power still rests in the people. And I think that's the main thing. You know, nullification is not rebellion. Nullification is not going wild. Nullification is just where the states can call a foul and say, no, the federal governments are out of their limited, enumerated authority. And I don't even use the word power because I don't think that our founding fathers were looking to give power to any branch of government. The power, they said, goes to the people. And the responsibilities of the federal government and the responsibilities of the state governments are always toward an end of enhancing the liberty of the people. Unique in all the world, constitutional republic based on the rule of law with representative government. And as we talked earlier, that there's really no supremacy clause because it had to be made pursuant to the Constitution for anything to be upheld, any law to be upheld.
Yeah, the Constitution is supreme, not the court, not the federal government. The Constitution is supreme.
Exactly. And so when in 2021, when the federal government started issuing all those mandates in violation of our individual liberties, that's what provoked McNally to write Senate Joint Resolution 9005. And we're going in a circle here. It's a very circular argument. How can they agree with this and say, yes, he used the word nullification in that resolution? Then what's the problem now?
Right.
What's the problem now?
And they made it clear they weren't talking just about lawsuits. We do the lawsuits all the time, okay? But you know, that's going to the federal government to ask the federal government to follow the Constitution. And that should not, I'm not saying that you never use lawsuits, but to think that that's the only way is crazy. You're going to let the federal government, a branch of the federal government, determine the length of powers of the federal government? No, I mean, when it's obvious, that's when you nullify. And it's not just because you don't like it. If it's clearly unconstitutional, and states have to be able to make that determination,
right.
You know, everything cannot be the court. If the court is the final word, the rest of the Constitution is meaningless. And you're taking, how do you take an oath? You take an oath to whatever the next Supreme Court decision is?
Exactly. And when you're trying to build that house and you're using opinion here, opinion there, where's the centrality? Where is the order? Where is the governance? There is none. You've reduced yourselves to bullies. Whoever can come up with whatever law they want and then try to make you enforce it. When you take it to its extreme, it's absurd. And we know our founding fathers never intended that. We know that up until 1887, it was pretty clear, and I guess that's why we had the issue in 1860s, because people were realizing that each state had a sovereign right, and they could come out of that union if they wanted to, and that was allowed. And of course, the people, particularly in the North, who exercised a lot of the power, that would have upset their control, and they had more money and more means to build an army. So all of that, part of our history, reinforces the fact that states knew they could withdraw or they could just nullify something that the federal government was in overreach. Right. It's a simple theory.
Well, and the people in the North used nullification prior to the Civil War. The Fugitive Slave Act, they used nullification. Nullification, a lot of times we hear about 1832 in South Carolina and the tariff issue, and a lot of people say, see, it didn't work. Well, actually, it did work. They did lower the tariff. That's what they wanted. Nullify is to make something null or void. There's various ways of doing that. You know, sometimes you can just do it by non-accommodating, by the non-commandeering, but sometimes you have to take stronger action. But in that case, they did lower it. Now, like you mentioned, we've got all kinds of things, states that are nullifying. Federal law still says marijuana is illegal, but we got legal marijuana where? California, Colorado, where else? I don't know. I mean, we have a lot of things that are illegal.
Let me
go ahead.
But let me speak to that. The federal government, when they realized, really because the government doesn't have authority over intrastate commerce.
Right.
They have authority over interstate commerce. Yeah. So Rohrabacher, the representative in D.C., back in 2014, I believe, added an amendment to the federal budget that said if a state wants to create a medical cannabis program that is intrastate, it's legal for them to do that. Well, the truth is, intrastate commerce, you can do a lot of things, just like we talked about the guns. Yep. You can do whatever you want to with regard to that if it's intrastate. And the irony of that, so now 38 states have legal medical cannabis programs, and if they take marijuana or cannabis off the schedule, which a couple of times it appeared that this president was going to, that would have been really bad news for Tennessee, because rather than creating an intrastate where the state of Tennessee could control who could grow, where they could grow it, how they could sell it, all of that would be able to become under the state's laws. If it goes interstate, if they take it off the schedule, then it's going to be Katie bar the door. There'll be products coming into Tennessee from China, from Eastern Europe, from Canada, from a lot of places where there are a lot of bad players. And medical science, Israel has been using medical cannabis for over 50 years. Dr. Raphael Meshulam has researched it there. But the point is, intrastate, interstate, those are important. And when you look at what the federal government, though, has created that patchwork, because they wouldn't take it off schedule, but they would leave it and allow it to be taking place in each state. And so states are exercising that authority. Well, we as a state can exercise a lot of authority. If it's not given to the federal government in the Constitution, we can bring forward nullification.
Yeah.
And we're back to where we started.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the summer session here just in a second, but I do want to say one thing for some others out there that might not be as familiar with the topic about nullification. When we say Tennessee is going to nullify some federal overreach, whether it's a Supreme Court opinion, executive order, whatever, we're only saying we're nullifying it for the state of Tennessee. We're not saying that it's nullified across the country. We're just saying that in the state of Tennessee, we're not playing that game. It doesn't affect any other state. So just keep that in mind.
It doesn't.
Now, we need everybody, with this upcoming special session on Thursday in the Senate, in Cordell Hall, at the Senate Room 1 at 12:30 to 3:30, 12:30 to 3:30. We are going to have, speaking on behalf of the bill, Attorney Jeff Koppel. He's also expert on the Constitution, which, by the way, he didn't learn in law school. He learned on his own. And we're going to have Joe Wolverton, also a lawyer and also an expert on the Constitution. They are going to be speaking on behalf of the idea of nullification. They're going to push back against some of the claims the AG has made. Like I say, I think it's his constitutionally infirm opinion.
It's his case law ineptness on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're going to talk about nullification and talk about the actual legislation. So we want, it's open to the public. We want as many people there as possible. But, you know, I don't know that I have ever been to a summer session. I've been to different committee meetings. I don't know. So what should people expect when they come to this summer session? Obviously, the bill is not going to be voted on per se, like you indicated earlier, but what should they expect to see?
What they'll expect to see is that committee, and you named the people on the committee, Richard Briggs, Paige Wally, Mark Pody, Ed Jackson, Sarah Kyle, Adam Lowe, John Stevens, Jeff Yarborough, and Ken Yeager. They will be seated up on the dais there in Senate Meeting Room 1, Hearing Room 1. So you come into the Cordell Hall building, go to the first floor, and you enter on the second floor on one side and on the first floor on another side. So just make sure you get to the first floor, centrally located there in Cordell Hall, and the Senate Meeting Room 1. It's the larger one. And so there are chairs there that fill the room, seats that fill the room, and get there early, I would think. Well, maybe not too early, because before that one, they're going to have another summer study on wetlands. So I'm assuming it will be in the same room, and they'll have to clear that one out and then get this one in. But you can sit there, and typically in a meeting, they don't allow any clapping. They don't allow any talking or shouting or whatever else. There's a decorum that's expected. And Jeff Koppel, you know, to come to hear him and Dr. Joe Wolverton will be an education in and of itself, and it'll help build up your confidence in when you discuss it with others. The opposition side is Mark Pulliam, who is also an attorney. And I do not know him, do not know anything about him.
Yeah, well, Jeff's already debated him, and I thought, well, obviously I'm biased in favor of nullification, but I thought Jeff got the best of him. So
good. Well, and so that will take place, and do come. I really would hope that a lot of people will show up and let the General Assembly realize that the people of Tennessee expect us to uphold our constitutional oath.
I do want to say real quick, there was a debate between Jeff and Mark Pulliam back in July, and it's on the website, TN Informer, and it's also on the tncss.com website, or excuse me, Weebly.com website, and you can also read the legislation. You can get a lot of information about nullification. Any closing thoughts?
I just thank you for doing this, and I thank the people who are important in this really important issue. And we need to make certain that Tennesseans are informed to understand that if there comes down an unconstitutional mandate out of the federal government, that we are prepared to have 5 different methods to exercise the age-old process of nullification.
Well, hey, thank you for being with us. Thank you for what you do. I look forward to seeing you Thursday. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us tonight. I do have a few event announcements and some information about our guests for the next week. But please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notification bell, so you'll never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, tninformer.com. You can find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Got a couple announcements here. Tennessee Freedom will meet tomorrow, October 1st, 6 p.m. Central at Calvary Chapel, 110 West Locust Street in Johnson City. Topics are Q&A with Johnson City Commission candidates, state sovereignty, and a medical update with Dr. Denise Sibley. If you want to learn the true foundations of the American Republic, on Saturday, October 26th from 1 to 6 p.m. Central, attorney Jeff Cobble, who we just mentioned, will be teaching on that very topic at the Peachtree Learning Center. It was once a church, so you'll probably recognize it. It's at 100 North Main Street in Sparta, Tennessee. Donations are accepted but not required. Text or call 931-316-9639. The summer study session, I want to say this one more time, the summer study session on nullification legislation will be this Thursday, October 3rd from 12:30 to 3:30 p.m. Central in Nashville, Cordell Hall Building, Senate Conference Room 1. Open to the public. We need to fill the room. We need to fill the hallway. They do have monitors outside, so if you can't get in the room, and I think the room holds about maybe 100 people, you can watch it from the outside. How much was that, Senator?
At least 100.
At least 100? Okay, great.
Yeah, comfortably. And there are other places you can see it, and it will be screened, so I do encourage everyone to come.
Okay. So Jeff Cobble, the author, will be speaking in defense of it, as will Joe Wolverton III. He's also an author, an attorney and an expert on the Constitution. And some of the legislators, like I said, are going to be hiding behind the AG's opinion, and that's what Jeff and Joe will show the weakness in the AG's arguments, in my opinion. Watch it for yourself and read a transcript on the website, tncs.weebly.com, under the Nullification Constitution tab. Scroll to the bottom and watch or read the long or short versions. And I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself there. That's in reference to a show I did with Jeff about the AG's opinion back in March. And we've got a long and a short version on the TNCSS website. Share with your friends and definitely your elected officials. Our guests for next week's show will be Sasha Latipova, a former pharma executive who now exposes the dangers of vaccines and policies of the CDC and other entities. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.